Who is the quarterback one in the NFL draft this year? More specifically, from
Come on.
a dynasty football perspective,
Yeah, boy.
Badake and I are going to have a good old little debate. We have a different quarterback one. So, what we're going to do is we're going to make our case and you guys decide where you stand. So, comment down below. Before you watch this, tell us who is your quarterback one right now. And let us know at the end of the video if we maybe change your perspective either way that you might lean. Drop a like, subscribe to support the channel, or if you like Dynasty content, and do us a favor. Give us a second to get through both of our takes. We'll have a debate at the end. Badake will go, I will go, and then we'll kind of go back and forth and have a conversation. So give us a chance to really get our thoughts out, and then we'll see where we stand. So, Badake, who is your quarterback one in the 2023 Dynasty rookie class?
My quarterback one and my prediction, the first overall quarterback in the NFL draft, and that's C.J. Stroud, Ohio State. 6'3", 215 pounds, 21 years old, from Ranchero Chucamonga, California. He's a Cali boy, born and bred. If you don't,
That is Rancho Cucamonga.
Rancho Chucamonga.
I used to live really close to that.
Oh, actually. Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool. That's where he's from. 4-star recruit. He played football and basketball, obviously. I mean, he's a two-sport athlete. And I'm going to give you reasons why I believe CJ is the better prospect in my eyes. The overall guy that I believe is going to be a little bit more successful in the long run as an NFL quarterback. Do you remember the 3 C's when we play Call of Duty? I have a little thing when we play Call of Duty. And I'm not going to tell you the 3 C's right away, but there's a couple things that you need to know, and I think all quarterbacks should have, which somewhat correlates to Call of Duty, right? So if you know what Call of Duty is, it's a game. Zach and I play it sometimes. You go in with friends, you play teams of 4, and you go in, right? It's either Call of Duty or Fortnite. And I have these 3 things that I kind of say to the boys before we go in and be like, all right, boys, we just need to lock in, and here are the 3 C's. C number 1, composure. This is for CJ Sprout, right? Composure, a.k.a. poise in the pocket. The composure from CJ in big-time moments is just different, right? He's cool. He's a cool cat, cool, calm, collective. He's not rattled by the rush, in my opinion. Mind you, this is all my opinion. And they're things that I've seen in my scouting process. What I believe people don't see with CJ, which I believe they kind of knock him for, is that when he's poised in the pocket, he stays in the pocket, but he doesn't run out. That's because he's always keeping his eyes downfield, right? And we'll get to the legs a little bit later, right? So that in my eyes, that means he's an elite pocket passer. We've seen that, and I think that was probably one of his greatest strengths. The fact that he's an elite pocket passer and how composed he is in every stage in the moment is not too big for CJ. Whether it's just a regular game, whether it's the college playoffs, I think the biggest, I think if there was one game that says who is CJ Stroud as a quarterback prospect, and that's the Georgia game. It don't matter about any of the other games, in my opinion. Go watch that Georgia game. That is who CJ Stroud is. That's the type of quarterback he can be, right? So that's something every NFL team needs, composure. Number 2. So the first C is composure, a.k.a. poise in the NFL fantasy football terms. Number 2, clutch, which is ball placement, a.k.a. ball placement. CJ's accuracy is fantastic. He's hitting his wide receiver with strides, giving him the ability to make big-time plays, throwing with anticipation, throwing the ball with precision, threading the needle when he needs to. He can drop the ball in tight windows, protecting his wide receivers, beating the defender at any point in time, wherever he is in the pocket, whether he's in the pocket or outside the pocket. He is 7th in big-time plays amongst quarterbacks, according to PFF, a college quarterbacks. Big time throws. So if you don't know what big time throw is, and this is the definition on PFF, a pass with excellent ball location and timing, generally thrown further down the field or in a tight window, meaning he is making the hard throws. He is 7th in big time throws in college quarterbacks amongst PFF. According to PFF. Versus Bryce Young, because we're talking about CJ or Bryce Young. Bryce Young is 23rd. Okay, so CJ 7th, Bryce is 23rd. So you have the first C is composure, a.k.a. poise. The second one is clutch, a.k.a. ball placement. And the third one is comms. So we need to have comms when we're on the field. We need to keep the comms clean, right? We need to make sure everyone knows what's happening, which is the processing of the play, Okay. The ability to read defenses, identifying leverages, right? This is something that CJ is exceptional in my opinion. Setting up the protection, knowing where the blitz is going to be coming from, going left and right, the ability to change the play at the line of scrimmage as a signal caller. And that's exactly what everyone does in the NFL right here, right now, right? I mean, we saw that with Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, everyone, all the elite people do it, right? And the limited times that he does move outside the pocket, he's directing traffic. And when you see those plays, when he's once again going outside, but go watch the Georgia game. You see him. He's telling Marvin Harrison, yo, come this way, go that way. He's directing traffic, right? He's doing those things outside the pocket. So that's the comms, the processing, and the all-field leadership. I mean, we can read it and read about it. Read all about it. We won't know until we actually see it in the actual NFL game. But apparently, a fantastic off-the-field leadership. Right. So we have the 3 C's. So when you go into a game, a Call of Duty game, when you come in as a quarterback, and the prospects and the things that I want to see are the 3 C's, which in my opinion, CJ has: composure, clutch, comms. Right. So you're about to be rocking with your team. He's coming in. He's probably saying this to his team. That's what I see from CJ. And that's exactly what I love. Everything that he brings to the fields. Right. So what is my knock on Bryce? And I think it is the biggest thing, and I think it is truly the only thing. And I think it is probably one of the biggest things for Bryce versus CJ. It's the size, right? And I know there's an argument saying, well, if CJ was this, if CJ was that, if Bryce was like this tall, if Bryce was that tall, fact is he's not, right? Fact is...
No one's making that argument except for me. Let me make my argument. No one's making that. Okay.
No, I'm not. I didn't. I'm just saying, I'm saying
you're looking at my notes.
So many people. I'm not. So many people have said Bryce Young is this quarterback, and if he was this high, or Bryce, if he had this, if he had the weapons around him compared to CJ, it would have been this, right? He could be this. And maybe all those things are in your notes or whatever the case may be. I just think that there's so much knock on CJ based off of the reasons why he can't move out of the pocket, right? The reasons why he doesn't have the legs. The legs, in my personal opinion, we've seen that he has legs. That's not the first thing he's doing, right? The first thing he's doing is staying in the pocket, looking downfield, because that's who he is. Not that he doesn't have the natural instincts to create space or make people miss. He has that. That's just not his first thought process. He wants to throw the ball downfield. And I think a lot of people, not you, I think a lot of people are out there saying, you know what? I just don't like it because he can't move, because we need mobile quarterbacks. You see the Lamar Jackson, you see the Patrick Mahomes, right? You see the Kyler Murrays. And I think CJ does have that. That's just not what he does instantly, because he's willing to take the hit in the pocket. He's willing to sit in there. So if we're knocking CJ based on the mobility and the athleticism, I think we need to look at, the biggest thing is, how fast is he? And the one thing I looked into is the 40 time. And maybe it's not right. It's unofficial right now, so keep that in mind. Unofficially, CJ has ran a faster 40 to these NFL quarterbacks. Unofficially. So this could be completely washed once the NFL Combine comes, and this point is irrelevant. Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Daniel Jones, Trevor Lawrence, Patrick Mahomes. Does that mean he's more talented? No. Does that mean he has a little bit more athleticism? No. But does it mean that he can't move outside the pocket? Doesn't mean he doesn't have the ability or the speed to do those things. So I think a lot of people out there saying that he can't move outside the pocket and the mobility, because that's the biggest knock when you see from CJ, it's the mobility. Doesn't have it compared to Bryce. It's there. It's not something that happens, right? And I can kind of broke it down, and we spoke about this a little bit off camera, off camera, saying that, well, some of these guys were drafted with the ability to rush, right? They knew that they had the ability to rush, but necessarily weren't drafted for that. Daniel Jones wasn't drafted with the ability to rush. He had the ability. He probably did rush more than CJ in college, but it wasn't significant where he was a guy taking so many attempts, right? Patrick Mahomes wasn't a guy that was rushing so much in college. He had the ability. Same thing with Josh Allen. Wasn't rushing so. When I say rushing so much, I'm saying the guy didn't have the attempts that they have now. If you say that Josh Allen would have been the cold QB1 on the Bills with the mobility that he had, we weren't expecting him to be used that way. What if he goes into a system where the opportunity is more with the legs? Anyways, this is why he's my QB1. This is why I believe he's going to unlock those things in the next level. So I love everything that he's doing. I love that he can have, once again, the 3 C's before Zach goes. Composure, clutch, comms. That's exactly what I like from CJ. I love the processing. I love the ball placement, and I love the poise. I think all those things are going to translate phenomenal into the next level.
All right. So I like CJ Stroud. I like him. I don't think he is a better prospect than Bryce, but I do like him. Bryce Young is my quarterback 1. Heisman winner in 2021. Has CJ won a Heisman? Just asking. Just asking for a friend. No. He ain't won no Heisman.
No.
Heisman winner in 2021. That doesn't mean that he's going to be a better quarterback in the NFL than CJ. So give me a second. But in that year, he put up 4,800 total yards and 50 total touchdowns. 2-time All-American, Maxwell Award winner. Let's talk about the improvisation first. The modern day NFL wants an improviser. And the only backing, if you're Team CJ here, that you have is one game. And yes, it was one hell of a game versus the best competition in college football versus the Georgia Bulldogs in the college football playoffs. But what about the rest of the film? What does the rest of the film say? Are we going to get that CJ Stroud, that version of CJ Stroud in the NFL? Or are we going to get this guy who is a little bit nervous of getting out of the pocket, not sure exactly when the play breaks down? And I'm going to tell you why I think he had a more easy time being protected than these other guys. But first, as far as Bryce Young as an improviser and throwing on the run, he is probably the best improvising quarterback I have ever watched at the collegiate level. Now, we only started scouting, 3 or 4 years ago? Okay, so, it's not like we have this. We've been scouting for 50 years, but for me, he is one of the best improvising quarterbacks I've ever watched. Has a real special ability to bounce out of the pocket and just step into space. And yes, keep his eyes downfield and allow the play to develop. That is what GMs are looking for. They're looking for the Kyler Murrays of the world, the Patrick Mahomes of the world. They're looking for the next player who's able to do the most with the least. Okay. For Bryce, it's not a question whether it's a huge part of his game, improvisation. It absolutely is. He is elite in that area. For CJ, he had a great performance versus Georgia, but it's still a question overall. That is still a question mark. Secondly, and I think most importantly, this is my most important difference between Bryce and CJ, these next 2 points, is how they respond to pressure. Because Bryce responds to pressure really, really well. He navigates the pocket well. He can feel the pressure without taking his eyes off of a developing play. I think this is where it separates them both. I know Bryce handles pressure well. CJ has some serious question marks, and he faced far less pressure than Bryce did. These are numbers. We can talk about feelings. These are numbers. 2022 pressures for Bryce Young versus CJ Stroud. Bryce Young, 45 more total pressures, despite playing one less game than CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud wasn't even pressured 100 times. Every other quarterback that we're talking about in this top 4, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, Bryce Young, all these guys were pressured over 140 times, I believe. Over 140. Total time sacked. Despite having 45 more total pressures, Bryce Young only has 4 more sacks. How about just the percentage of dropbacks? How many times was Bryce Young pressured? Well, he was pressured 10% more, over 10% more. How many times did Bryce Young have a clean pocket? Was he kept clean? Well, 10% less than CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud was kept clean in the pocket 76.6% of his dropbacks. That is ridiculous. And then you look at pressures turned into sacks, which to me tells me how well can you evade a sack? Again, we're talking about improvisers, guys who have good pocket presence, able to extend the play out of the pocket. Bryce Young has a lower percentage of pressures turned into sacks. And all this talk about Bryce Young's size. Bryce Young's not going to be able to see over the middle of the field. He's not going to. Well, he's actually one of the best passers over the middle field in college football this year. And he only has 2 total passes batted down compared to CJ's 3. Now, are those some incredible numbers to base an entire opinion on? No. But it shows me Bryce Young knows he's small. He knows how to navigate that. He's been small his entire life and he still keeps winning. So, all that considered, CJ Stroud did not face the kind of pressure that these other quarterbacks did. He just didn't. He just did not have that issue that a lot of these other guys did. Yet, he was able to put up, Bryce Young that is, was able to put up extremely similar numbers to CJ Stroud this year. Let's look at them side by side. If we take rushing yards and passing yards, total yards per game, Bryce Young actually had more total yards per game. Touchdowns per game, very similar. Completion percentage per game, very similar. If you look at the team drop percentage, so did your wide receiver room help you out? Were people dropping the ball? CJ Stroud, only 5.9%, meaning his wide receivers and his receivers on average dropped the ball way less than Bryce Young's. Okay. Team record. Well, they were both 11-2. Now Bryce missed a couple games. And then one plays in the SEC, which is the best by far competition that you can face in college football. The other plays in the Big Ten. Now, granted, CJ Stroud had an incredible game versus Georgia. So we have to give him the credit there. So pressure, in my opinion, is not something that we can really have a defined answer on CJ Stroud just yet, because he didn't face anywhere near the pressure that all these other quarterbacks did. I don't think we can sit here and say at this point, CJ Stroud responds well to pressure. We believe he can. We see that in film, but we don't know for sure if that will translate to the NFL. Thirdly, who elevates the team around them, right? Pressure is only one area, but what if we consider the weapons that each of these guys had? Okay, because Bryce, I believe, elevates the team around him. He put up those kind of numbers that I just showed you guys, and he did all of that with the following wide receivers: Jermaine Burton, Ja'Cory Burks, Cameron Latu, a tight end, Kobe Prentice. Not a single wide receiver on his team had over 700 receiving yards. In fact, not a single wide receiver on Bryce Young's team was even in the top 115 in receiving yards this year in college football. Meanwhile, CJ Stroud had the best wide receiver duo in college football in the nation in Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka. Marvin Harrison Jr., 6th in receiving yards. Emeka Egbuka, 9th in receiving yards. Again, Bryce Young did not have a single wide receiver that was in the top 115 in receiving yards this year. We talk about landing spots being so important for these quarterbacks. I would personally argue that we have seen Bryce Young is probably landing spot proof. He had so little to work with this year. He was pressured just as much as Will Levis, just as much as Anthony Richardson, and he elevated the team around him with the least. We don't know that about CJ yet. We don't. Can he? Yes, I like CJ. I really do. But that is still a question mark. So in conclusion, Bryce faced more pressure, and I believe he handled it better. He had mediocre weapons and still put up very similar numbers to CJ Stroud. And he can improvise like some of the greatest in the game. Oh, and by the way, he had the #1 passing grade according to PFF in the nation this year, Bryce Young. Okay. Lastly, when you talk about pro comps, like how can he translate into the NFL? I see a lot of 3 players in particular. Drew Brees, his anticipation, ball placement, accuracy. Kyler Murray, the improvisation, throwing on the run. And number 3, my floor, Tua Tags, the accuracy and timing. If you look at all those players, yes, Bryce Young doesn't have over 200 pounds. Let's see what he weighs in at the combine when they officially measure. But you can see a similar pathway to success. And we are talking about the NFL nowadays. What position is more protected today than it has ever been in the history of this game? Over 100 years, it's the quarterback position. That's where the money comes in. That's where the viewership comes in. Quarterbacks are more protected today than they have ever been. It is the best time ever to draft a prospect like Bryce Young. And what I was going to say, which is why I thought Badake might be looking at my notes, maybe he didn't. You probably didn't. What I was going to say, because I put it out on Twitter, and it sparked a little conversation.
Right,
if Bryce Young was CJ Stroud's size, he would be one of the best quarterback prospects in the last decade. If CJ was Bryce's size, let me ask you guys, when would he be drafted? Would he be drafted in the 3rd round? 4th round? 5th round? Okay. Size is not something that Bryce can change, but it's something that he has won at his entire career at that size. So I'm a big fan of Bryce Young. I actually really like CJ Stroud as well, but I do have Bryce Young as my one. I think 1A, 1B. I actually feel like I'm more moving into like a 1 and 2 category as we move in closer to the draft. Bryce 1, CJ 2. But why don't we start a little bit of a debate? You can ask me questions. I'll ask you. One of the things that you talked about is composure. You said composure was big for CJ Stroud. Well, I would argue, again, with the numbers that I brought, it's much easier to stay composed when you have a clean pocket 76.6% of the time. So that would be my rebuttal to that.
Right.
I think he has shown that he can stay composed in the pocket, but I would also argue that it's much easier to do that when you have the best wide receiver duo in the country and you also have been pressured, less than 25% of the time in the pocket. So that would be my rebuttal to that.
No, and I completely I hear you, and it's just like I think for me, it's just like this, just two sides of the coin for everything. It's just unfortunate that Bryce didn't have the talent that was usually around him. That kind of made that could have made that easier for him, in the past. If I'm not mistaken, I'm just trying to see. I was trying to look it up while you were talking, and I still can't find it. I was trying to find the wide receivers he had last year, but I don't think it made any difference anyway.
Last year he had Jameson Williams, and that was it. And by the way, if we want to talk about that, Jameson Williams couldn't beat out anyone at Ohio State. He had to leave Ohio State.
Yeah,
that was the competition that CJ was working with. No,
for sure. I mean,
as much as I love Jameson is
a guy now. Like at least the expectations. We hope that
I'm a big fan of his.
He's going to be a guy now. No, but look, I think I'm in the place where CJ and Bryce are like 1A, 1B. So for me, it's not really moving. I do believe that Bryce has a lot of hurdles to go past.
I agree.
Based off the size. And I think a lot of teams, and we've seen the success with size, like we've seen the past success, but I think those situations were really, really, I don't want to say they were really set up for these guys for success coming in, because when Kyler Murray came in, he didn't have the best weapons around him at the time. Yeah. When Drew came in, he didn't have the best weapons around him at the time. So I think over time, it becomes easier for them for guys with the size we feel a lot more comfortable. But I think for me, we've seen the injuries before with these younger people, but I don't know if Bryce is going to be able to sit in the pocket and take those big hits. And I'm not saying that he can't. I'm just thinking over time, the durability is probably not going to be there. And we've seen it with Drew Brees sitting in the pocket. He gets popped and something happens with his arm or hands or wrist, whatever the case may be. And the same thing with Kyler, even though Kyler was a little bit different. I think it was a non-contact ACL. But, those are the type of situations that you can kind of get into. Tua, even though he's a little bit bigger, he doesn't know how to get tackled. He freaking falls with his head. Like, it's just like personal little things, nitpicks that you can really go on against Bryce. But I think, look, he has, like you said, he has all the tangibles, all the stuff. And I think a lot of the reasons why he had to move was because of so much of the pressure, and I wonder how, not saying the thought process is if he had less pressure, he probably would put up so much better numbers, right? Not having to move in the pocket. And then that means, okay, well, there's less rushing there, right? So like you elevate one, and then you decrease in the other. So it's like, well, he has good passing, but the rushing wasn't there this year.
To be fair, I didn't talk about Bryce Young's rushing at all the entire time.
It's not, and I know it's kind of going rebuttal back and forth with us, but I think the natural community, and I think that's what a lot of people kind of say, right? Bryce people like Bryce because of the things that I've seen on social media, on Twitter, is size, and then CJ's mobility, right? Those are the two biggest knocks I've seen. Right. And my personal opinion is like, well, you can't change the size, but you can change the mobility. So, and I think that's kind of the difference.
I think it just depends on like what you saw of these players on film. Mm-hmm. For me, rushing ability would be like bottom. It would be like the 10th thing I would point out that I like about Bryce, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's not even mobility; it's improvisation,
right?
And I think that's the biggest thing. It's not so much mobility; it's improvisation, getting out of the pocket, like the Russell Wilsons before he was bad, like the Patrick Mahomes, like Josh Allen has started to do. So I think that's what is maybe separating. But again, you have the calling card of, well, he did it versus Georgia, the best competition. A couple things that you said.
Sorry, continue.
Big time throws. I think that number is a little bit difficult to rely on because CJ played more games, and again, less pressure, better competition. But I understand where you're coming from. And then the 40 time, I mean, it's kind of irrelevant until the combine.
Exactly. It is kind of
Let's
irrelevant.
be honest.
It is kind of relevant, but that's why I was trying to hit with the necessary mobility, the speed of like how if he does come in faster than some of these guys for the community, not you specifically, but for the community, are you saying that the mobility and the speed and the ability to get out of the pocket is not there with that type of speed? With guys that are faster, that like once again, the names, Josh Allen, Joe, Danny Dimes. I mean, all those guys can get out of the pocket. We've seen it before. All those guys have the ability to create those extra yardage, and we've seen that. I mean, does CJ come in with the expectation of not to rush and just have like a Joe Burrow expectation? Like Joe Burrow didn't do so much on the ground this year. Like, but he was drafted.
That's what I'm saying. I don't think that either of these guys need to be like top 5 rushers to be successful.
Yeah, they have the ability to do those things. Doesn't mean that it's like Joe Burrow in college was running all over the fields, extending plays, and like.
He was extending plays. I don't think he was doing much rushing, though.
No, he wasn't exactly. But I'm saying when I say running all over the field, I'm saying extending plays, going left and right, getting out of the pocket, like you were insinuating with Bryce. Yeah, CJ does do that. He just doesn't do it often. And maybe my rebuttal to you would be like, well, maybe he didn't have to do it often because he had less pressure, right? I mean, that could be.
Which then again raises questions: how will he perform versus NFL
versus the pressure? Exactly.
I think again, you think about it like
two sides.
If CJ Stroud goes to the Texans. Or Bryce Young goes to the Texans. Who do I feel better about being successful there? Bryce Young. Because I've already seen him do the most with the least. Meanwhile, CJ can do that, but he has had the most always. So that's the question right there.
I guess that's...
Not to say that he won't. It's just to say like, there are questions.
No, I get you. And just 2 minutes here, maybe we can extend it, but I would have to say the same thing with a guy like Justin Fields. And they're two different prospects, and they bring different qualities. But I'm saying the situation. Justin Fields always escaped out of the pocket. He had a bad offensive line with no weapons in Chicago for the past couple of years. I think if CJ does go to a team that doesn't have these weapons, I still believe he'll be able to move out of the. He may not be the rusher of Justin Fields or Bryce.
That's where we disagree, because I think that CJ Stroud would be a disaster in Chicago in the last 2 years.
Oh, maybe. Or maybe he can elevate the wide receivers like the Darnell Mooney's and all these other guys.
Maybe Cole Kmet is a much better option. And
it's just there's so many two sides of the coin, so many hypotheticals, and we probably won't know until we see these guys on the NFL field with their NFL teams with a little bit more context. But I hear you.
Well, I'm good. Are you good?
I'm good.
Just to clarify, I really like CJ Stroud. You really like?
I really like Bryce. And I really like Bryce.
Yeah, exactly. So we're fans of both of these players, but we do have different opinions on who's won. Both of them, like Stroud is my 2, Bryce is your 2, so we have them both in the top 2. But and I think there's a significant teardrop after those guys as far as NFL ready. Okay. Comment down below who's your quarterback 1. Like the video, subscribe if you like Dynasty content, and we'll see you in a future video here very soon.
Yo, what's good? Thanks for watching. We got a lot more videos.
A lot more.
If you want more videos,
watch it.
You can also subscribe
right now
if you want to.
You need to.
And lastly, don't forget that you can sign up to support the show and get exclusive content by going to patreon.com/FantasyLand fam.